afternoon and welcome to Doctoring It Up with your host Dominic. I am Dominic and this is my grandfather Dominic. I was named after him.
You.
So many of you probably know that his sauce is world renowned for its authenticity and freshness and love.
Spoken like a true Italian.
Yes. So we are inviting you into the kitchen of the famous Dominic Angelo Di Pietro Antonio.
Alla Dominic.
The kitchen
Or
a la
Papa
Dominic.
sauce, okay?
The common name for the sauce is Papa sauce.
Papa sauce. Today we're going to do Papa sauce number 101.
Yes, that's of course.
What we're going to do today is go through the motions of making a Papa sauce. Now we're going to go through there step by step, and I'm going to do things and tell you what I'm doing it and why I'm doing it, okay? So let's get started.
Let's get started.
Okay?
First things first,
Okay.
never cook without a drink. Right, Papa?
Yes, help yourself. Where's mine? Where's yours?
Oh, mine's out there.
So, first step in any Papa sauce is to pour yourself a little snort here. And Papa's usually extremely generous. When he pours it, it goes all the way up to the rim there. But we're going to avoid spillage today and just give it a good 1.5 ounces there. So there you have it. First step in Papa sauce. Now, Katie and I prefer a good Irish whiskey. Papa and
You
Mom
want some more?
and Auntie prefer gin or vodka. Today they're drinking vodka.
So what we're going to have today is called Papa Sauce 101. What I'm going to do is go through the motions of making and preparing what you have to do to make what everybody calls Papa sauce. It really is a spaghetti sauce. That's what people like. Anyway,
Layman's terms.
first thing I want to say is about recipes. People think that you should rely on recipes. I don't. There used to be a chef on the Food Channel, and he was called a Galloping Gourmet. And he said, take a recipe and then use it as a springboard. What's he mean by that? The recipe was created by a man or a woman that liked the particular dish the way they liked it. Well, if you read the recipe, maybe you don't like what they used, you can add something or substitute something else. So imagination here is prime. Think about it, and if you don't like what they have in it, put something in you like it. Make the recipe yours. The recipe is not etched in stone, it's a guide. Use it as a springboard, like he said, okay? So,
Yes, to imagination.
to imagination. First thing we're going to do is decide how much sauce we're going to make. So, Courtney here has got 2 cans of puree tomatoes. I like to use puree tomatoes because there's no seeds.
Now, don't forget what he says about the springboard. If you prefer crushed tomatoes or if you prefer diced tomatoes, then that will come to your preference.
The reason I like to use pureed tomatoes is because there's no seeds. I hate to go somewhere and eat a pasta sauce that's got seeds in it. That to me is gross. Okay, but other people like seeds. If you don't like seeds, use puree. If you want to use crushed tomatoes, strain them and take the seeds out. If you don't mind seeds, eat the seeds. I don't care. Now what we're going to do is take care of the canned stuff that we got. Courtney has supplied us with some pureed tomatoes, which is right here. And
The tomato's very important. You have to make sure it's a good tomato, nothing too cheap, you know?
then we have some tomato sauce in the cans. And then we have some chicken broth. Now a lot of people use water when they make a tomato sauce or pasta sauce. And I don't like water because it just makes everything blah. So I use chicken broth, which gives it a lot of flavor. And it also takes the place of salt. When I cook, I never use salt. Because what you buy today, everything you buy has got salt in it. You don't need a lot of salt. If you want to flavor everything, use herbs or spices, or broth, or cheese. Everything, anything but salt. Okay, so we're going to get a can opener and have Courtney open all these cans. Open up
So
all
this
those
is
cans.
how you open a can. You go like this, and then you go like this, and then it goes like that. Now some of you at home might have a little handheld can opener. Now that's just fine. We're just fancy over here.
What we're making today is what is called as an herb sauce. We're not using any meat. If you use meat, you can use chicken or pork or beef or flank steak or even hamburger. But you have to know how to treat each piece of meat. Before you put the meat in the sauce, you've got to brown it off. And with the pork and the beef and the chicken, you can brown it off without any concerns. But if you're going to brown off like meatballs or ground beef, you should do that in a separate pot because that stuff creates a lot of oil grease. You don't want that in your sauce. Do that in a separate pan and then drain the meat before you put it in your sauce. So we're going to show you how to do all this, except that we're not going to have meat today. We're just going to have an herb sauce, which consists of herbs, tomato sauce, broth, and TLC. What's TLC? Tender loving care. That's the best thing about cooking. You have to know how to do that. Right? You're all done with the cans. All right. So now what we're going to do is talk about onions. What I like to use is a purple onion because you can use a yellow onion or a Bermuda onion, but those onions are kind of bitter. The purple onion is sweeter, has more flavor. Now, this onion is too big to use for what we got today, so I'm going to use half of it. Now, the way you do that, I'm going to cut it this way. Why did I say that way? I'm not going to cut it. I'm not going to cut it this way. I'm going to cut it this way. Why? Because, see the root here? When I cut it, then half the root is left on what I'm going to use. Now, you have to use a sharp knife. A sharp knife is very essential because if you use a dull knife, that's more dangerous. It could slip and cut you. A sharp knife is safer. So I'm going to cut this thing, like I say, this way. Okay. Now we'll take this half of the onion. We're going to use that. This half of the onion, we're going to save for later. You can wrap this up in saran wrap and put it in a vegetable bin and save it for another dish you're going to make tomorrow or the next day. Alright, now, something you should know about this purple onion. It's nice, it's flavorful, and it's sweet. There's a thing you have to know about this. There's an outer layer here That's called the paper. See that paper? You want to get rid of that. But you see this piece right here?
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it's colorful, isn't it? But you see how stiff that is?
Oh, that's not
See how
good
stiff that is?
Mm-hmm.
You can't digest this. You don't want to eat that. Don't want to eat this part. You see this layer?
Oh, that one's bad too?
That's the outer layer of the onion. Now, this happens on any onion. The outer layer is always the most bitter. So you want to get rid of that. Get rid of this.
I
Get
should have brought
rid
my
of this.
goggles.
Get rid of that outer layer. Get rid of that stuff you can't digest. So now we're stuck here with a nice purple onion. Okay. Now you notice that I didn't take part of the root off. There it is. Now, for our purposes, we're going to mince this onion. The reason we're going to mince it, I didn't say chop, I say mince. Mince means very fine. Reason is because when you're eating this dish, you don't want to taste the onion. You want to have the flavor of the onion. Now, people that I know of take the onion and slice it, and then when you go to eat this sauce, you got a big slice of mushy thing here that you don't want to eat. So what I do is I take this onion and I cut it 3 ways. All right? See how that is? You see the part of the root there? I left that there for a reason. It kind of holds the onion together when you're cutting it. Now, I said I'm going to cut it 3 ways. First way is this way. Okay? Here we go. And you notice I didn't go all the way through. Okay? Another slice, another slice, another slice. You see how sharp your knife should be? Okay? Now the second cut is this way. I'm going to cut this way. You notice now I'm not going to cut through the root. I want the root to stay there to hold the onion together. Now the more cuts you get this way, the finer your mince is going to be. So watch the fingertips. Always use your finger like that. Okay? There we go. Okay? Okay, turn the onion around. This is the third cut. It's going to be this way. See the root still there. Okay? Now, the finer you do this, the mincer you're going to get. Now look, finger, protect your finger. There we go. See how that comes out there like that? It's almost minced already, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay. Now here's the root. Don't want to throw that away. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to mince. I didn't say chop, I said mince. There's a difference. Notice how I take the knife. See the back of the knife? That's not the edge. The edge is here. Whenever you scrape your board, use the back of the knife. Never use the edge of the knife because you're going to dull it. You're going to be in trouble. You get a dull knife again. Keep the thumb out of the way. Okay, like this. Time to scrape the board. Get rid of that stuff. Back of the knife, not the edge. Back of the knife. Okay, like that. Okay, here we go again. Now, the finer you mince it, the better off you're going to be, because what you want from this onion is the flavor. You don't want to eat the onion. There's other things to eat besides having a slice or a slab of this sloppy, gooey thing, which they call a slab. You don't want that. You want to mince this thing. Get as fine as you can. You find out that after you do this a while, you can get pretty good at it. Okay. I think that's minced enough. You notice I'm using the back of the knife, okay? I think that's okay. We're going to go with this. I think that's plenty, all right. Of course, you got this cleanup to do. Anytime you mince an onion like that, it goes all over the place. I don't know why it does that. Anyway, next thing we're going to do is the garlic. Now, the reason for this is that before you start heating up the pan, you have to have everything ready, because when the pan gets hot and starts everything cooked, you got to be in a hurry. You got to be right there. Here's the garlic. That's called a head of garlic. What you want is some cloves, which are in here. How do you do that? Well, there's some paper. You can get rid of the paper. And some people do this. Hear that? Okay. More paper. More paper. Now what we want is a couple of cloves. Now, here's a pretty good clove. I think for this amount of sauce that we're going to do, I think that this size cloves, I think, is good enough.
Some big cloves.
They're big. Now, if you like garlic, you can put a whole lot in you like, but I like garlic, but I just like the flavor. The best way to get rid of this stuff, and the way you want to mince it, is you see that little root right there? Get rid of that root, like that. There's that root right there, okay. And then out comes this. Well, that's fine, but it didn't get all the paper off, right? You want to get the paper off. So how do you do that? This is where we're going to do that. Put the clove down there like that. Take your knife like this. Okay. See how that paper comes off like that? Easy. Okay. That's how you peel garlic. Fresh garlic, that is. Okay. Okay, now we also want to mince this garlic. Well, see that little tip right there? You want to get rid of that little tip. That's no good. We've already took off the root. See that little tip? I want to get rid of that. Okay. There now. Alright. Turn the clove over so it lays down easy. And then just mince this. Remember the fingers. Okay. Okay. Now we're going to mince it. Now the thing about garlic is that it has a different boiling point than onions. So you want to saute the onions and you want to saute the garlic. Alright, keep them separate. There. So now, back of my knife again, right? So, you keep the garlic separate from the onions. Now what we're going to do is saute the onions and the garlic. Now, if you're going to use meat of any kind, now's the time to prepare the meat. If you made meatballs, you should have done that before now. If you're going to have chicken or pork or beef or a braciole, whatever, you should make that up before now. Because what we're going to do now is put this on the stove, and when this stuff gets ready, you have to put the meat in there at the same time. Otherwise, you lost it all. So, what we're going to do now is go to the stove with this stuff, and we're going to get ready to saute things. Okay, Courtney. Now, what we're going to do is add some olive oil to the pan. Here you go.
Just a little drizzle will do ya.
Oh no. Well, I use extra virgin olive oil. Some people use soy oil or corn oil or other kind of salad oil. The best thing for a sauce like this with tomatoes is extra virgin olive oil because it's more flavorful. But you have to be careful because it has a low boiling point. You do not want to get this too hot. So here you go, Courtney. Now what you do is a couple of turns in the pot, and what you want to do is cover the pot evenly, okay? A little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. All right, that's fine. Okay. Now, we're going to turn this on. Now, I have to tell you that this is an electric stove. You can have gas ranges, and you can have electric ranges. This is electric. So I'm going to turn this on to medium, like that. See, medium? Now, the good thing about electric stoves is that it has a thermostat. And as the product in the pan heats up, this thermostat knows when medium is arrived. When that heat is arrived, the thermostat shuts off and things cool down. The thermostat says, okay, so they have to raise it up to the temperature that you selected again. So what I'm saying is that throughout this cooking process, the thermostat is recycling all the time to keep it at the particular temperature you ordered. If you have a gas stove, you turn on the gas stove to a position, and that gas stove does it all the time, and things get hotter and hotter and hotter. And the good thing about electric is that the thermostat gives you that complete temperature that you order. All right, how do you know this is hot? I'll tell you. There's a couple of different ways you can tell if the oil in there is hot. If you're careful and if you're experienced, you can see that the oil in there, when it gets hot, it shimmers. The oil does really shimmer. Okay? Now some people, give me a wooden spoon out of there, please. Some people say that if you take this part of the wooden spoon, stick it in there, and if the oil bubbles around here, that means oil's hot. I don't believe it. Because what you're doing is you're putting this down in a pot, and what you're doing is you're testing the temperature of the pot. The pot's hot, not the oil. So, keep looking at this, and if you think it's shimmering, okay. If you don't think it's shimmering, then the thing to do then is to take a little bit of your onion, stick it right in the center of the pot, and see if it sautés. The thing about sautéing and boiling is very important. If the oil is cold and you put something in there, then the product you put in there becomes soaked in oil and you got a boiled thing. You don't want that. You want the oil hot enough so that the product you put in here doesn't absorb the oil. The oil sautés the product. In this case, it's onions. It could happen with meat or whatever you're trying to fry. When you're trying to fry something, it's very important that the oil should be as hot as you can get it without burning. So now I look at this, and I see a little shimmer, not much. And I can see it's warm. Okay, what do you think, Courtney? You see shimmer?
It's shimmering.
A little bit?
Yeah.
A little bit? Okay, now, the best way I like to do it, Courtney, take a little pinch of the onion. Put it right there in the center of the pot. Not fizzing, is it? No.
Just a
that
little
means the
bit.
oil's not hot enough.
Yeah.
See? We have to wait now a while for it.
Well, now it
It's
goes.
starting now, a little get hot, all right? Okay. All right, we're about ready. Put that away. Get my favorite spatula there, a wooden flat thing. No, this way, right in front. Yeah, okay. What I like to use is a wooden spatula. And they're very easy to clean. You can use wooden spatulas or you can use stainless steel. I don't like stainless steel because that could scratch the bottom of the pan. I don't like to use aluminum because the acid in the tomatoes creates a erosive content and you get that metallic flavor in the sauce. I don't like to use plastic because they say plastic is good for 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, but there's an odor that comes out from plastic when it's heat. All right, now look at the onions. See how they're doing all right?
Oh yeah.
All right, Courtney?
Which one's your favorite?
Anyone, they're both the same.
Okay.
Now, put the onions in there, kind of spread them around a little bit. Okay. All right. All right. Yeah. Okay, now, start up now. Pretend you're in an ice skating rink. Give it that figure 8. You know what that is? Okay. Thing you want to remember is to flavor in stages, in layers. Now I got some peppercorn, pepper. I like flavors. Good. We're gonna flavor that in layers. Every time we put something in there, we want to flavor it. Keep stirring it so that everything doesn't get burned. Right? Be sure everybody in there is getting in the pool. They like each other. They're getting familiar. Okay. We kept the garlic separate because garlic burns up quicker than onions do. So you don't want burned garlic in your dish. That tastes terrible. In the meantime, we've got all the cans open and we're ready to put everything in the pot. We have to wait for the onions to get sauteed. You can tell when that happens is because they turn opaque. And that is kind of like, what do you call it?
Translucent?
Translucent, yeah, right. Good girl. Okay, keep doing that until you can tell they're translucent. I'll bring over some of the stuff we need here. Getting there. A little bit more, a little more. Okay, so good. Now we're going to add the garlic. Garlic doesn't take long. Okay. Doing a good stuff. Figure 8 stuff. Flavor in stages, layers. Okay. Be surprised how much flavor that you get out of these pepper things because it doesn't really make it hot, but it makes it real flavorful. Now, if you're going to use mushrooms, now's the time to add mushrooms, but you have to remember that mushrooms are like sponges and they sop up all the oil, so you may have to use a little bit more oil if you're using mushrooms. Now, if you're going to brown some meat, which is chicken, pork, or beef, whatever, now's the time to brown the meat in here. And you have to be careful that they don't dry up. If you think you need more oil, just add some more oil, it's okay. If you're going to add meatballs or ground beef, you want to saute those or brown those in a separate pan because that meat creates a lot of oil or grease or whatever you want to call it. You don't want that in your sauce. So do that in a separate pan and take the meat out and drain it and then put it back in here. Okay. That looks good. Now, it's time to add the liquid. Now the puree, tomato puree is the thickest of all. So what I like to do is I like to add first the tomato sauce. Now you notice I haven't touched the control, it's still medium. So now we're going to add this. You hear that? Nice. Like the other one. Well, like that. There, you hold that. Okay. Take this. Pour it into there. See, that way you get all the tomato sauce in there.
Oh,
Okay.
that's a nice
there
trick.
You go. All right. There goes the last one. Okay. Now, it's time for the tomatoes. Get me in here. Wait a minute. Here. Straight out of there. Okay. There's the other one. Here, you do that. Here again, we're going to add some more flavor for layers, right? Okay.
That's a full pot.
Full pot. Now, it's time to add all of the spices, herbs.
Herbs time.
If you're using dried herbs, now's the time to put them in there because you want the herbs to hydrate and then give their flavors to the dish. If you're using a fresh herb, you want to use those at the very last minute when it takes about, say, 15 or 20 minutes before you're ready to take it off. Then you put the fresh herbs in there. But now's the time to put in those dried herbs, okay? Oh,
So we
basil.
have some dried basil.
Now I'm going to shake basil in here and get this out of here. A little bit of basil. You can add as much basil as you want because basil and tomatoes go together forever and they're very good.
Like me and you, Papa.
Yeah. Now, you want to be careful with
Oregano.
Oregano goes a long way. It's very, very potent. So we want a little bit of oregano. If you're going to use a bay leaf, that's fine. One bay leaf.
And whoever gets it in their bowl is the winner.
Yeah, but you never want to cut up bay leaf. You never want to chop it because you cannot digest bay leaf. Leave it whole. The flavor is good. When you're ready to serve, take the bay leaf out and throw it away.
Well, this is rosemary and
This is what is called
thyme.
herbes de Provence. It contains spices like marjoram, thyme, savory, and rosemary. So we'll take a little bit of this, put it in there. Okay. Now, that's going to be good. We're going to stir that up really good. The other thing I want to put in here is cheese. I like to use Romano Pecorino cheese because it's a goat cheese and it's softer and it's more flavorful than Parmesan. Parmesan is a harder cheese, stiffer. It's not so good for sauces like this. So I take some ground pecorino, put that in there. You notice we haven't used salt. I never use salt when I cook because the things you buy in the store has sodium in it. It's got a lot of processed salt in it. And if you use cheese like this, it's got salt, and that takes the place of salt. So now, you got everything mixed up and everybody's happy in there in this swimming pool, they're good and feeling good. Everybody gets excited and they're just wonderful in there, okay? So now what we do is put the lid on, put your spatula in there, put the lid on. Notice I haven't touched it's still medium. It'll take a while, but this is going to boil. Now when it boils, you want to keep stirring this about every 5-10 minutes. When it boils, then you turn this down to a low simmer and let it simmer for this amount of sauce. I like to simmer for an hour and a half or 2 hours, stirring it every once in a while. And you know, the old saying is that these old ladies in Italy with the black dresses and black stockings used to take this stuff and boil it for 2-3 days. That doesn't work. All you want to do is simmer this long enough, because if you don't, the tomatoes taste raw. And you don't want raw tomatoes in your dish. I find that if you leave it this size pot about 2 hours at a slow simmer, everything's going to turn out really fine. The tomatoes are going to taste really good. And the herbs and spices that are going to melt with each other. And when you cook your pasta, that's in a separate pot. And you should have a big enough pot so that the pasta swims around easy enough, because they like each other, but they want to be alone when they're cooking. Okay?
A rolling boil, right?
A rolling boil. You put the lid on the pot, and when it boils, then you take your pasta, put it in there, put the lid back on. When it boils again, take the lid off, you stir everything, and then you time it. And it depends on how cooked you want your pasta to be, but you gotta keep stirring it like every couple of minutes. People say they put olive oil in there, or any kind of oil, in the boiling water. It prevents the pasta from sticking. That's because they're too lazy to stir it. If you coat the pasta with oil, when you dish it up, the pasta cannot absorb any of the sauce. And that's why I like a thinner sauce, because if you have a real thick sauce, the pasta won't absorb any sauce, and you're going to eat raw pasta.
Now let's talk about our favorite macaronis. We always use rigatoni mostly, yeah?
Rigatoni's good. It takes a while to cook it, I think. You have to be careful, because they say on a box, 9 to 10 minutes. Well, I don't believe that. You got to cook it to your own taste. They say al dente. Well, al dente means to the tooth and crisp on the outside and soft. I don't believe that. To me, al dente is raw. Okay, so you cook it like you want. You got to keep time. See how long you want to cook it. I find that some pastas take 15 minutes. Farfalle, that's a little elbows with the knot in the middle, it takes 20 minutes or more, because it's tough and you got to cook it. I don't like it raw. Okay, so what I'm saying is that forget this al dente. Test it yourself. Whatever you like, it's good. Then don't mix the pasta with the sauce. Keep them separate, and you serve it separately. Yeah, you put it in a bowl and mix it up, but if you have any pasta left over, don't mix it with the sauce, because if you put it in the refrigerator, a couple of days later, it's going to absorb all that sauce, and it's going to be mushy. So keep it separate, and then when you're ready to heat it up, heat them up separately, then put them together when you're ready to eat. So, now what we're waiting for is this thing to come to a boil. It'll take a while yet, not yet. When you lift that up again, you'll see that
heat out?
Be little bubbles. But now every now and then, you got to give it the ice. Remember, you're in a skating rink. Figure 8. Okay?
Now this rosemary is very common rosemary. It's actually from the garden of Deborah Lynette. It grows most anywhere here in Henderson. There's a lot of rosemary bushes, but you can also buy it at the grocery store fresh. Papa's going to chop that up real fine so we can put that in at the end. as well. Now this particular rosemary might have gotten peed on a little bit by a dog, so we made sure we washed it very well before we are chopping it.
Now you see how little I'm using, because rosemary is very powerful. It's very strong. You don't want to use too much.
Papa has a smaller little chopping knife for the herbs.
Okay, now that's ready. Now, like I said, about 10 or 15 minutes before we're ready to take the sauce over there, then we'll put this in there and let it get happy with the rest of the people in there, okay? I didn't use this fresh basil because it's still too young. You won't get a lot of flavor out of this very young stuff. You see that they're not really all green, they're a little bit yellow. It's still a young plant. You want basil that have very large and deep green leaves. And if you stand here, you could smell it, okay? That's good basil. But this is all right. It's going to grow up. And it's going to be ready. I'll give you another little hint of what I do. Is when I'm cooking the pasta in a separate pot and the water is boiling, and I stir the sauce with that wooden spatula, the spatula comes out red with sauce. So I dump it in the boiling water and that cleans out the spatula.
It's true. That's a good trick.
So, you know where the saran wrap is? Get yourself some.
Okay.
You want to take this home with you as you go on you. No, that's different. There you go. Pull it up.
Turn it off, Katie.
Get the camera. Can you show it
She's
here?
done.
See the bubble? You starting to bubble? See the bubble? It's starting. Stir it.
Stirring time.
Figure eight. Figure eight. Okay. Wonderful.
Just a little bit.
All right.
And then we let
That's
it
good.
boil
Now,
again.
we'll put the lid back on. Now then, pretty soon, you're going to see everything bubble like that. That's when you turn this down to simmer. And then every 10 or 15 minutes, stir it again.
Oh, wow. You see that boil?
Stir it.
So we're going to just do a little bit of stirring, and it continues to boil when we stir it. Oh,
Sit back. There you go.
and
Okay.
that'll do it.
Now we're going to turn this down to simmer. Okay? That's it. Now you come in every 15 to 20 minutes and you stir it.
Game on my phone.
Salud!
Everything looks good. Everything's fine. Everybody's happy in there. They're swimming along nicely. Courtney has stirred this very nicely. It's wonderful. The only thing I have to add to this wonderful dish is that you notice we didn't measure anything. And that's because if you're making a sauce like this, or a soup, or a stew, or a roast, you can order anything up you like in your own head. Put it in there, it will work. Because recipes only say that the person that wrote that recipe is what they like to have. So if you read the recipe, you don't like it, use your imagination and change it if you want to. The only thing that you have to make sure you measure is for baking.
Bacon?
Baking.
Baking.
Oh, baking.
Baking. Cakes, pies, muffins, those things.
Yeah.
Bread.
You have to be precise and do the exact measurements, because all of those ingredients, when they're in the oven, make a chemical reaction, and if you don't have them right, the results will be disastrous. So, if you're baking, pies, cakes, whatever, be accurate, but when you're making things like this, anything goes. Shoot
Okay.
yourself.
And that's how we learn to cook. On our next episode, we'll be exploring the world of risotto. Thank you for joining us.
Risotto, yeah, that's another thing. Okay.
And have a lovely evening.
Yeah.
DPS Antonio South.